Good morning, everyone. It's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. Without any further ado, let's get started. My name's Lee Henson, president and founder of AgileDad. Happy Tuesday to you. I wanted to talk about Agile metrics today. I know that sounds crazy, but you could argue that if there was one single thing that you would expect from a PMO and expect them to be good at, it would be metrics. PMOs often exalt the mantra that the PMO is the single voice of truth, while most PMO analysts will tell you that you have formulas that will be, that will yield the best output, if you will. Analysts seem to be far less savvy about the metrics that are important in Agile. So the question is, what type of metrics are important in Agile and what should they be used for? Well, if you're a person who's looking at Agile teams, it may be tempting to start pulling data to begin to assess and compare teams to one another and compare individuals to one another. Maybe it's good for you to say a story point for one team is 3 points for another team, or a story point equals a day, or a team completing 40 story points a week is not better than a team that completes 10 story points per week. There's just so much confusion about metrics, what's counted, what's calculated, that oftentimes when you start talking about metrics and how you measure them, the productivity will backfire, and you'll actually end up doing worse than what you originally thought you would do. With Agile teams, we should be looking for customer satisfaction and continuous delivery as our most valuable metrics. And I think that, if more teams would take time to study the Agile Manifesto, to deep dive into that and look at the 12 principles that support it and the Agile Manifesto, that they'd start to realize what makes metrics so important. So that begs the question, who are the metrics for? Well, Agile teams should be, to a greater or lesser degree, self-organizing. And if that means that they're self-organizing, then these metrics would be for them. To tune and adjust behavior, they need to understand how they're doing, what's happening, where they're going. And this is where all your metrics come from. So it's interesting because now that you understand that's where it comes from, Agile metrics are primarily a feedback loop for the team. Teams should regularly review all their Agile metrics, reflect and use the data to become more productive. And then as they do that, the metrics will be a starting point for a conversation. Imagine the metrics are showing that a team's cycle time is worsened. Well, the first steps for the team to understand why that is, what happened, right? It could be due to a unique one-off event that it'll just right itself and right the ship and we'll have happily ever after. Or it could be a catastrophic indication that backlog grooming was not performed adequately. But whatever the reason, the metrics are supposed to be an indicator, right? And it's up to the team to reflect and diagnose and figure out how to use it. Once again, I teach in my classes that the Scrum Master is a lot like a doctor. They can lead you to, where the problem is. They can even write a prescription, but they can't force the people to accept the prescription and use it as they should, right? So there's lots of care that needs to be taken when you're going through and trying to do this correctly. Care should always be taken when adding Agile metrics into reports without any kind of commentary attached. You want something, because without explanation, assumptions are going to be made, people are going to twist this to mean what they want, and you're worse off with the metrics than you are without them, right? So now that begs the question, how should Agile metrics be used then? Well, they should be used to help achieve the goal of satisfying the customers or stakeholders through the early and continuous delivery of a feedback loop. If I go and prepare, something in the microwave oven, right? I go and I prepare a meal in the microwave oven. I want to know with a continuous feedback loop, just because it beeps doesn't mean it's done. Or, just because I put this hot dog in for that long doesn't mean every hot dog has to be in for that long. Was one more frozen? Was the refrigerator colder? Is it colder to outside or inside? There's so many environmental and other factors that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? So you should undertake experiments and create a hypothesis and undertake experiments based on that hypothesis. If you're going to do that, you're going to learn more about WIP limits and how they apply. You're going to learn about all the supporting people to help you be successful. And you may even be able to swindle me into a hot dog. No, I think that the skill set and the mindset issues can be resolved, but I think that you just need to really stay focused and understand how the metrics are being used and why. And I think that when you start talking about pace and value and calculate the team's ability to predict itself and become capable of doing more work, if you divide the number of stories completed by the number of stories committed, the review variance from can range anywhere from 100 and whatever to zero, right? During a sprint, progress usually is tracked using a burn down chart or a burn up chart or a cumulative flow diagram or whatever chart you're going to use to figure it out. There's lots of good ways to do it. There's tons of free Excel burn down charts online, so lots of places for you to get things. Another term that I hear all the time that people use together is velocity. That determines the regular run rate or return rate for a Scrum team. Teams usually strive for a stable, predictable velocity, but oftentimes they challenge themselves to increase velocity, though the efficiencies and automation weren't there, right? So you need to make sure that they understand that these efficiencies aren't there, but there's still going to be some things that need to do. Calculate by comparing story points, obviously. And if they have the number of story points completed during a sprint for the previous few sprints, you can add those together throughout the high, throughout the low, divide by 3, whatever you need to do, and come up with a really solid answer for what your velocity should be. Next, I want to spend a moment talking to you about iteration complete to production. Ideally, every single sprint should result in a push to production. However, sometimes that's not the case. Track elapsed hours and days from the end of your sprint to the time that something hits production. And if you do that, if there's wild variances, you can decide to track a rolling average, right? But you just want to make sure you're getting things done, I guess is what it boils down to. You also need to make sure that if you're getting things done, that you have a solid release frequency, like a cadence, right? One of the aims of Agile is to deliver in short cycles, but it doesn't mean that something's going to be delivered every single week, right? You need to throttle and figure out how you're going to deliver things, what you're going to deliver, and how it's going to look and feel, right? So lots of things you need to consider when it comes to the release. As far as value is concerned, a lot of people try to measure value, and this is probably one of the hardest ones. I mean, yes, there's Agile earned value. You can figure that out. But this metric requires product managers and product owners and stakeholders to assign a value to each story, some type of value score, either using story point systems, using dollars, figuring something out, but this shows that lower value features are being implemented and maybe time to stop developing on that product, or it could show that we still have a lot of high value features left and that we're gaining good headway by creating these things. Another thing I like to look for from a metric perspective is cycle time. So I often ask myself, cycle time is the measure of the total time it takes for an individual or team to gain a consistent cycle, and figure out what they can do to be more lean, right? They need to be more predictable in delivering their work. This is the whole Kanban, Scrumban approach, and this helps them be successful. Last but not least, I want to talk to you about a couple more. Lead time is one. The lead time is the time from the moment when a request was made and placed on a board till the moment it gets picked up and delivered. And of course, you got WIP, work in progress, and you've heard me talk about that. Less is more. Limit a bunch of this, and I've gone through and done the rest of these for you in that category. So there's lots of great information here. I hope that you'll take this to heart. This is something that's really important. I mean, I want you to figure these things out. I want you to figure out how to leverage metrics. Tune in tomorrow and we'll continue in part 2. We'll talk a little more about satisfaction and how that plays into it. And we'll take it from there. So until tomorrow, stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Do take care.